Hi guys, Frankie V from Frozen Sand with a bit of an announcement here, not about a new project startup yet again, but rather a decision made on an old project called Turnpike, which is a conversion from of Turnpike from 4.3/Intech 3 over to Unreal 4/Resurgence, and it's just simply gotten to the point where here with this that I have to admit complete failure as to the ideals of what is Turnpike as a map, a community favored map, is failed to achieve that ultimate goal. Now I've done a little bit of research on the interwebs here on YouTube in particular by searching for other failures as far as popular map conversions goes. What really stands out is Facing Worlds, where they discussed the lack of popularity of Facing Worlds and other, say, versions of Unreal Tournament that failed to meet the expectations of those who are playing the game. In other words, they did a damn good job of a visual conversion, but they sort of, along the way, lost something in the fabric that really didn't make it feel like the original in some, let's say, personal type of way, I guess you would say. And I would have to admit to myself that it simply just doesn't feel right. For one thing, there's been somewhat of a scaling misstep in the overall size of the map, which the first hint was this area here. We know that in the original there are two garage doors where, for whatever reason, I could only fit one, and in actuality, the overall map feels like it's much larger, a bit larger than it should be. And a lot of the objects that should be within a certain perspective range just don't match up. So, for example, the pillars here, they really need to be brought over a little bit more to the side here, so you can play peekaboo around it. I think we could probably do that, and it would then be a little bit closer to the original positioning, but. It's just that everything about it seems, I don't know, fabricated. That's the word. Considering that most of the stuff used in here is, of course, fabricated. They're components. Some of this is actually custom built, but most of this is just stuff that was bought and tossed in to fill a space. So, really not what you... Well, to put it in perspective, it's like trying to rebuild a '69 Ford Mustang, and you have a choice to either hot rod it or put it back to original showroom condition. So, unfortunately, what we have here is neither. We're neither back to showroom condition, nor are we hot rodded. It just seems like this is a map that's on its own original map pathway, which is to say that I'm not going to toss this out entirely, but rather I'm just going to go along with the idea that this is going to be just another variation of a map based semi on the Turnpike layout. But I'm going to knock down the fence. I'm going to move the buildings across the street here, create more space and over here and over there, because it is actually a pretty nice looking map in a whole. Open this gate here, put, players have to run over here, down here, over there, to get the flag instead of it just being a short dash, which is what made Turnpike popular, I would suspect, at any rate. But, make this like maybe a 64 player map to get more bodies on here, much more wide open space. Then I can be as creative as I wish and kind of break a few rules as to maintaining continuity of classic conversions. So let's kind of truck over to the example. Now, another thing to kind of mention here is, of course, a lot of the map conversions were kind of guesswork as to things like scaling, where particular items within the map is. It's going to be obvious that some of the typical map jumps that were performed on this map in 4.2 will probably not work. Not that I tested it, but it will be tested. But here's what we got. Happy Day has kind of figured out how to do a really nice, beautiful conversion of the BSP files using utility apps that are now available to do that task of just of doing an extraction. Now, obviously, the detailing in this extraction from the BSP is not efficient, in that as I discovered, it's a bad idea to have open back-facing as to free air environment using a engine that uses real-world lighting models and bounces light all over the place. So I'll talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing there in just a second. But there's our pillar, exactly where it should be. The player, if we hit play, this is a 6-foot character in its relative, let's say, scaled environment. And I think we can, if you played it, look at the windows. The windows are actually much smaller. That says something right there, because I think we have 4 across in the original, or in the rebuild, and we have 4 across here. At any rate, there's definitely a scaling error problems that are going on. This building over here, a wall. This is kind of a tucked in area here. It's not as deep in the rebuild. What else do we got? Of course, this area in here is a lot more wide open. And of course, all that other stuff that's going on back here, now that you kind of look at it, it's more of a distraction than anything. This has kind of a simplicity. So this is what we're going to land up with. A much more truer representation. However, the issue at hand is we do have permission from the original mapper, the guy who did at least the layout work, to do a redo of this. But there's no way really to be able to tell exactly where the build assets, like the materials and the textures and the map models, the mailbox and the signposts, the signs, the trucks, the trees, and the desks, the computers, the laptops, or the photocopiers, the trash cans, the pictures on the walls. There's no way to know exactly who supplied those or where they came from. Usually this kind of stuff is sourced out, I guess. So they would have to be all replaced with all new assets, and this is where things are going to get kind of interesting. Okay, we're going to scoot over to Max. Here is the 3ds Max version of Turnpike in all its glory. So it was given to me by Happy Day in FBX format, true to scale, tested out, and what have you. I brought it into 3ds Max, and the nice thing about the file is that the objects maintain the link to the particular material that it's looking for, textures that it's looking for. Obviously it doesn't find it. So 3ds Max has an nice feature where you can give it a list of folders to look through for the textures and all its subdirectories, and if it doesn't find the textures where it's supposed to be, it will then go through the list and see if it can find it within the list of folders that you supply it. So so that's what I did. I set up dozens and dozens of folders that point to the unpacked version of Urban Terra 4.3, and it just goes through and finds the correct folders and says, oh, okay, there it is, and it loads it in, and then I can use a utility to consolidate everything. So this is where we're kind of stand as far as having a environment, a layout that we can build up to scale with all original assets. In this case, the first thing that I'm going to be doing, if you've been following along, of course, with the Raider conversion of how I'm building facades so that they seal in the environments and everything kind of snaps together so there's no air leaks and stuff like that. I'm going to be doing the same thing to Turnpike here, and I do expect that the results are going to be rather pleasant as far as establishing a base lighting solution first, and then we'll go along and using the facade work, we're going to paint it up with all new materials. Of course, what we're going to be doing in reality is finding an appropriate, let's say, replacement for a given texture. Using the 1 meter by 1 meter rule that has been established by Epic. That means that a particular texture material applied to a surface must have a coverage of 1 meter by 1 meter as to its real world scale value. In other words, you don't have scaling issues where you're making the texture bigger or smaller to make it tile properly, and etc., because everybody has their own idea about how big a texture should be. Your texture has to, if it's to be supplied through the Epic Marketplace, has to have coverage of 1 meter by 1 meter as to its true world scale. So if the brick wall if you make a brick wall material, then it has to look like brick on a 1 meter by 1 meter plane. So what that does is, if you just drag and drop different materials onto it, you don't have scaling issues where it's big, small, and everything's to scale, one after the other. So you can try, a couple of different wall textures, and see how they fit. So the new version of that's how I'm going to set up the new version of Turnpike. Is everything is going to be based on some sort of standardized value, as well as a rule I made for myself: no holes into the open world ever. Even if you think it's back faced properly, it will let light in. A slightest little crack is, well, as I mentioned in Raiders, it's kind of like having a giant hole in the wall. A slight wee crack, is can cause all sorts of problems that's difficult to identify. And the way to kind of solve that, I think I kind of demonstrated how to figure that out in Unreal 4, is when you select using the boundary tool. Okay. Ooh. A lot of red around the object means that you have holes in your facade. If you use the boundary tool and you grab your facade and no red shows up, it means that it's completely sealed and you shouldn't have any lighting issues whatsoever. Just as being a quick tip or what have you. Okay, so that I think that's not what we need to cover, all we need to cover here. So in the future, what will happen, I hope to happen, is to document the ongoing progress, and at the same time demonstrate the techniques that I'm going to be using to actually create the build from the ground up scratch. And the other thing I'm going to do is use all 100% fair use assets as during the construction, because, well, it allows this map to have a little bit more flexibility of what we want to do with it down the road, as to, say, maybe promote team map building or what have you. One of the interesting features of the Unreal 4 engine is the ability to create layers. So this is going to become well, it's going to be almost a dedicated episode onto itself, because level streaming is going to become rather important as to how to introduce custom entities that are bound to urban terror, but at the same time you can keep a persistent level that is 100% map only. Map only meaning that, well, you could use it for any other game that you wish that supports the Unreal 4 engine. So you could, you can make a map that would be work for Unreal Tournament, but also make the map that works for Urban Terror by putting whatever entities that are required within a level streaming. It's also how, well, we're not 100% locked in yet, but it's also how we're going to be doing different game types onto the same map without having to have a number of the same map but configured for different game types. So this same map will be able to play capture the flag. You'll be able to play TS. You'll be able to play bomb mode. You'll be able to play, well, basically any game that needs in-game toys to be able to accomplish the requirements of that particular game type. Can be supplied into the game at runtime by using level streaming and a little blueprint work to trigger that kind of stuff. It's also a good way to do your lighting. My habit now is to make a master lighting level and put it in as a streaming level, and then activating it so it's always loaded. Another thing is putting specific elements that I want to work on. I will explain those in separate videos. I'm just kind of doing a general overview of what's going on with the Turnpike, and it's time to call it quits with the old version and do a bit of a reset here and start from scratch. Okay, hope that wasn't too chatty. I do tend to roll on, but hey, hopefully the information is a little bit more important than rather my presentation skills. Okay, see you guys.